Hello everybody, and welcome to our first Swift Programming Language Basics series tutorial where we are going to cover variables and data types. Before we get started, let's do a quick review of how to open up a project to start typing out Swift code once you've downloaded Xcode from the App Store. So I've gone ahead and put Xcode in my dock here. So let's open that up. And if you don't have Xcode in your dock, there's several ways you can get to your applications, but one easy way is to click on your desktop until you see the Go in your main menu bar here. Then click on the Go and then click on the applications, and Xcode will be in your applications. Now, as we mentioned in our introductory tutorial, there's two easy ways to get started typing out Swift code. One is with a playground here. So if you want to create a playground, you can click on this, give your playground a name, choose your platform, and you should be fine with iOS. If you want to leave it on iOS, then you'd hit Next, determine where you want to save it, and hit Create. Then your playground will open up and you can start typing out your code. Another way that you can open up a simple project to start typing out Swift code is here with Create a New Xcode Project. So let's click on that. And then you want to go to Mac OS here and then choose Command Line Tool, hit Next, give your project a name. Make sure your language here is set to Swift, hit Next. Save it, hit Create, and then go over to your left sidebar here and click on Main Swift, and you're ready to go. Let's close that. Let's go back to Xcode. Now I've already gone ahead and prepared most of our code for this tutorial, so let's go ahead and open up that file. Before we go over our examples for variables and data types, let's go over a few notes. In computer programming, a variable is a storage location paired with an associated symbolic name or identifier that may or may not change. Think of it as a box you put stuff in. A few ways variables are used include, but are not limited to, when you need to create a placeholder for some part of your program that you don't know the value for yet or that will change, to give a name, characteristic, or value to a part of your code for later reuse, or to assign code to a variable with shorter syntax for later reuse. Okay, so that's a general definition for a variable and how they're used. Now here, let's go over a few notes regarding variables. Variables are a fundamental part of most programming languages, and all kinds of things can be assigned to variables, such as strings, numbers, functions, arrays, dictionaries, tuples, and the list goes on and on. And if you're not familiar with all of the terminology here, such as strings, functions, arrays, dictionaries, and so on, no worries, because we're going to go over examples of all of that in future tutorials. Most of the time, you don't need to declare a type for variables, such as int, float, and string. If you assign a value, the type can be inferred. Certain reserved words or keywords, such as var, let, and for, should not be used as variable names, and we'll show you examples of that. Often, the term variable is used in a general sense when referring to a var variable or a let constant. In general, a let constant uses less resources and is more efficient than a var variable. So if you think a variable won't change, you want to do your best to try to declare that as a let constant. Now, a note regarding Swift variable name style or naming conventions. Swift typically uses camel case style to break up a variable to make it more readable if needed. And this is an example of camel case style. Notice that the first letter is lowercase, and then the first letters of the following words, here and here, are uppercase. Okay? So it kind of mimics the humps on a camel's back, and that's why it's called camel case. Another important note regarding variables has to do with the equals signs. Remember that the single equal sign is for assignment, and the doubles equal sign is for equals. So we want to use the single equal sign to assign a value to a variable. A note regarding scope. Variable scope and where a variable is declared / used can determine how a variable is classified and what access parts of your code have to those variables, i.e. global variables versus local variables. In general, scope is determined by where a variable is declared. So for example, if you declare a variable only inside of a function, it's local to that function and without additional syntax is only available to that function and not outside of that function. And a variable's scope is also partly determined by where it's used inside of your code's curly brackets. And we'll go over many more examples of scope and variable scope in our future tutorials. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with our first example. To declare a variable, you want to use the var or let keywords. Then you want to give your variable a name. Then you want to use a single equal sign to assign a value to your variable. And then you want to declare your value. In this case, we have created a variable called weather1, and we have assigned a string to that variable. Now, a string is basically just a word or a sentence or some type of text inside double quotes. Now, you want to use the var keyword if you think that your variable may change at some point in time, okay? Now, in this example, we did not specify a type. However, you can explicitly specify a type if you'd like, as we did in this example. So again, we use the var keyword to state that this is a variable. We gave the variable a name. In this case, the name is weather2. Then you use a colon, and after the colon, you specify your type. And the value for this weather variable 2 is of type string, okay? Then we use our equal sign, and after the equal sign, we assign our value. And again, this is of type string, and we just put the string inside double quotes, okay? Now, as we mentioned earlier in our notes, if the value type can be inferred, you don't normally need to explicitly state that value type, as we've done here, okay? So this example here and this example here are basically the same. It just so happens that in this example, we have explicitly stated the type for the variable value that we have created, which is a string. Okay, so just keep in mind that if your variable type can be easily inferred, like in this case, you do not need to explicitly state the type. However, if the variable type cannot be inferred, or if you create a variable and you don't assign a value yet, as you'll see in future tutorials, you will need to explicitly state the type. Okay, so moving on, note that we mentioned that the var type variables can be changed. So to change a variable, all you have to do is use the variable name, then use your equal sign, and then after the equal sign, assign a new value. Okay, let's uncomment these print functions so we can show you that in this example, the weather1 variable should display the string sunny. And then here, after we've changed it, the print function should display the new changed weather1 value with the string raining. Okay, so here we assign the weather1 variable to have a value of sunny. We're going to use a print to display it. Then here we change that value, and now it should update and display the new value. So let's go ahead and run our code. And you can see down here in the console, the first weather1 here was sunny. Then we took that same weather1 variable and we changed it, and now it is raining. Next up, we have an example here of a variable we have created with the let keyword. And when you use the let keyword, that is technically a constant. And you want to create variables with the let keyword if you think it won't change. So to create a let constant, and as we mentioned earlier in our notes, oftentimes let constants and var variables are just simply referred to as variables. But to declare a let constant here, we use the let keyword, then give your variable a name. And in this case, we went ahead and explicitly stated the type. So we use a colon, we specify our type, the equal sign to assign our value, and then we assign our value. Now, one reason that I explicitly stated the type is because in this tutorial, we also want to go over data types. And the key data types that you'll use most often, some of we've already gone over, are string, double, float, character, int, and bool. Now, a double is very similar to a float. And to keep it simple, doubles and floats are both types of numbers that use decimal points. Doubles dedicate more resources to the size and precision of a number, and if you don't explicitly state a type for a decimal type number like this, it will default to a double. Okay, so just remember that doubles and floats are very similar, and if you're going to declare a number like pi that uses decimal places, you're going to usually use a double or a float, and most often you'll probably use a double. Okay, so this is how you can declare a constant, and remember, constants are variables that don't change. In this case, we used the double type. This is how you would declare a constant variable with the float type. Next, let's go over how to declare a constant with the character type. Okay, so you'll notice that the syntax is very similar to our previous examples. Now, when you declare a character, this one's a little bit different in that most of the time you probably want to go ahead and explicitly state the type for character. And the reason for that is that Xcode may not necessarily be able to infer the type of a character, and it may just consider it a string. Let's do a little test here. Let's get rid of the character type, and let's use a print function to display the type of this character variable. So we're going to type out type, we're going to use of, and then let's put in our character variable. Let's run this and see what we get. Okay, so we can see down here that the type for this character variable, according to Xcode right now, is a string. Let's put a little note in here. Type of char var. Okay, so yes, the type of the char var is a string. Now, if we want this to be known explicitly as a character, we want to go ahead and state that type. And you can kind of see why Xcode doesn't know how to infer the type. The reason is that we've gone ahead and put our text inside the double quotes, and this could be a string or a character. Just because it's only one letter or one character, Xcode doesn't have enough information to infer that that is a character, so we've gone ahead and explicitly stated that here. Okay, so that's how you create a variable with the character type. Moving on to our next example. This is one way that you could declare a variable with the int type. We've gone ahead and used the var keyword, given it a name, and even though this int type could be inferred, we've gone ahead and just explicitly stated it as an int type. We use the colon, state the type, equal sign, and assign the value. Okay, so that's how you would create an integer variable with a positive number. If you'd like to create an integer variable with a negative number, then you can just simply put a minus sign in front of your number. Now again, notice the difference between an int type and a float or a double type. Int types are just simply numbers without decimal places. Again, let's do another little test here. Let's use a print function. Let's put type of, and let's test the type of int variable too. Let's run our code. And you can see here in the console we get back a type of int. Again, let's put a little note in here. Run it again. And you can see we get type of int variable 2 is int. Now what if we added, say, a decimal place to this? Now let's run it again. You can see down here in the console, type of int variable 2 is now double. So Xcode has inferred this number to be of type double. And again, as we mentioned before, this could be of type float. However, since we didn't explicitly state the type, it defaults to the type double. Okay, so moving on to our next type. This is how you would declare a variable with type bool or boolean. And boolean values are just simply values that can be true or false. And we'll go over examples of how to use boolean type variables and values in future tutorials. Next, let's go over an example of how you could concatenate two variables. So here we've created two variables. These are string variables. This first value is chocolate, and then the second string value is chips. Now if we wanted to add these together, put these together, or concatenate these two, all you have to do is use a plus sign. So we're going to use a print function to display the output. Let's comment out our previous print and uncomment this one. Let's go ahead and run it. And you can see down here in the console, we get our string 1 and our string 2 variables concatenated together. So we get chocolate added together with chips. Moving on. One thing to note is that variable names are case sensitive. So you can see here we have a variable with the value 5, and the name of that variable is var1. Here we have another variable with the value 10, and the name is the same, however, the first letter is capitalized. Now these two variable names will be considered different, okay? So let's use a print to display the outcome for this. And inside the print round brackets, we have var1, lowercase, and var2 with the title case. Let's print this out. And we should get back 5 and 10. And this shows you that these two variables are considered different based on how you capitalize the letters. For our next example here, let's show you how you can perform a calculation with variable values. Okay, so we're going to use our two variable values here with the values 5 and 10, and we're just going to use a print to display. So we've put in a little string note here, and then a comma, and then after the comma, all we have to do is use those variable names and a plus sign to add them together. So the output for this should just simply add 5 and 10 together and give us 15. So let's run it. And you can see down here in the console we get var1 lowercase plus var1 uppercase, and 10 and 5 have been added together to give us 15. Now you could change that to, say, a minus sign, and we get 5 minus 10, which is negative 5. You could change that to division and run it. Okay, so this is actually a good example. You can see down here in the console that we get 0. Now we would expect to get 0.5 or 1/2 from this division. Now to fix that, one way you could fix this is to change this to a type double. So let's put in a 0.0 and a 0.0 and run this again. And you can see now we get 0.5. Okay? Now we could also change this to multiplication and run it again. And you can see we get 5 times 10, which is 50. Moving on to our next example. As we mentioned earlier, you can assign all kinds of things to variables. So in this example, we have assigned an array to a variable with the name shopping list array. Now we haven't covered arrays and dictionaries and all that good stuff yet, but for now you can just think of an array as a list of items put together in a container. Okay? So this array is a shopping list, and currently our shopping list consists of eggs, green peppers, and salad dressing. Here we have assigned a dictionary to a variable. We've given the variable the name planets dictionary. Now technically this is a let constant, but as we've mentioned several times, I usually refer to vars and lets as variables just in a general sense. Okay? Now a dictionary is somewhat similar to an array. However, dictionaries consist of key value pairs. So they're kind of like a list of things, like an array. However, they usually have two parts that go together, and those are called key value pairs. So in this example, we have a key and its corresponding part, which is a value. And in this example, the key are the planets, and the values are their corresponding moons. Okay, so next up, in this example, we're going to show you how you can use variables with what is sometimes called compound assignment operators or augmented assignment operators, or what I like to call running totals. So what we have done is we've created a variable here and we have assigned it the value 0. Now, as we know, if you use the var keyword, this start variable can be changed. And a common operation in programming is to take a variable and to, over time, when something happens, add to it or subtract from it or divide it or multiply it. And to do that, we use some form of this combination assignment / operation operator. Okay? And we'll go over this more in detail in our future tutorials. However, in this example, what we want to do is create a variable started out at 0 and then add 5 to that 2 times and create a sort of running total. So let's uncomment this print statement. And notice here we started at 0. We used our compound assignment operator here to add 5. And then we did the same thing again, and we added 5 here again. So this should be 0 plus 5 plus 5, and if we run our code, we should get 10 in the console, and we do. Okay? So if that didn't make perfect sense just yet, don't worry. We're going to go over all kinds of examples of how to use compound assignment operators with variables in the near future. Next up, we're going to show you how you can assign a function to a variable. Okay, so here we have created a simple function, and if this syntax doesn't make sense to you just yet, no worries. We're going to dedicate an entire tutorial to functions. But for now, just know that a function is something that does something or performs a task. So this function was created to add two numbers together. So we used the function keyword, we gave the function a name, add2, and inside the add2 round brackets, we're going to allow this function to take two arguments. The first argument is named 1, and it's of the int type, and the second argument is named 2, also of the int type. Then we use an arrow to tell the function to return an answer of int type. Okay, and then finally inside the curly brackets for the function, it's going to return 1 plus 2. So it's going to take these two arguments when we call the function and then add them together. Okay, so we can take this function here and assign it to a variable. So we create our variable. We've just named it function. Then we assign the function. And when we call this function or assign this function, inside the function round brackets, as we stated in our function, it's going to ask for two numbers and then add them together and then return that addition sum. So let's go ahead and run our code. And the output when we print this variable function should take 5 and 15 and add them together and give us 20. So let's go ahead and run it. And you can see down here in the console we get 20. Okay? So that is just a simple example of how you can create a function and then assign it to a variable. Next up, here we have an example of string interpolation. And this is just simply a way that you can insert variables into a string. So we have created two variables. We've given the first variable named num1 the value of 100, and the second variable named num2 the value of 200. And then here, we're going to use a print function to create a string and then insert these two values here into that string and perform an operation. Okay, so the syntax for string interpolation looks like this. This is just an example. Inside the double quotes, each time you want to put a variable in that string, you're going to use a backslash, and then you're going to use round brackets, and inside the round brackets you put your variable name. So this is going to be num1 variable, which is 100. Then we use some string text plus. Then we use string interpolation again here, and this is going to put in the variable num2, which has the value of 200. And again, the syntax is a backslash and the round brackets, and you put your variable inside the round brackets. And then here, we're going to use string interpolation yet again to add those two numbers together. So let's go ahead and run this. And you can see our output down here in the console is 100 plus 200 is 300. Okay. Next up, in this example, we just want to show you that you can convert the value of the types of variables. So we've created a variable here called num3. We've assigned it the value of 5. Now this variable type right now is going to infer to be of type integer. However, if for some reason you wanted to turn that into a string, all you have to do is type out string, and inside the round brackets for that string type, put your variable. Okay? So that's just a simple example of how you can convert a value of one type to another type. Now, not all types can be converted, and we'll go over examples of that in future tutorials. And then last but not least, just remember that if you want to check the type for a certain variable, you can always use this type of, and then put the variable in the round brackets. So if we run this code here, you can see that the type for var type here is int. If we change that to, say, 1.0, it should change to double. And it does. And if we put that in double quotes, it should now be of type string. And we get a string. Okay, so that's all we have for this Swift tutorial on variables and data types. We'll be doing many more Swift tutorials in the near future. Join us for those, and we'll see you next time.